writer for Counsels on Diet and Food is the same one that says we should not drink coffee because coffee is a stimulant because of the caffeine and the different effects, and we go through all the negatives it has on the system, and coffee does and coffee does that. But what we're seeing here is that now in the case of sickness, she used both egg and coffee. Now, what kind of sickness could that be? Because coffee is a stimulant and egg is also a stimulant. So quite obvious, whenever the body is exhausted, whenever the body is drained, whenever the body is emaciated and needs to be stimulated or uplifted, there are some things that are not regularly prescribed for use that can be used medicinally to bolster and strengthen our health, and we should not think it a violation of principle to use these things. This is Your Health Daily by Healthy Reforms. Greetings, brothers and sisters. Welcome back. Ella Joel Grant here from Healthy Reforms, and I have a health presentation I'd like to share with you this afternoon. A very important one after the recent outbreak of Salmonella as it pertains to eggs. And so we'll be touching on eggs this afternoon and your health, eggs and your health. And we'll also be looking at some extremes as it pertains to eggs, because many times when it comes to a reformed lifestyle, we hear that we should remove completely eggs from our diet. And after research and study from, of course, the spirit of prophecy and looking at the practical health science, I recognize that something is missing, and so I'm here to bring that to your attention. And also, we know the scripture told us in 3 John chapter 1 verse 2, Beloved, I wish above all things that thou mayest prosper and be in good health, even as thy soul prospereth. So it's not just a fact of singing, giving praise to God that is important. There's also the other aspect that our physical well-being should also be prospering, because it is through this body that we actually serve God. And so this is a very important topic, so I pray that you'll just take the time out and to just be attentive as we go through some very important pointers that are oftentimes overlooked, and we end up putting ourselves in some very difficult position by the choices we make. After all, Christ did lament in Hosea that my people perish for a lack of knowledge. And so I'm here to share some of this knowledge with you as it pertains to egg and your health. All right, so let's jump into some quick health facts about eggs, and then we'll jump into our story. So we understand that egg is actually 75% water, 12% protein, 10% fat, 1.2% carbohydrates, and less than 1% minerals. And it has 3 different types of fatty acids, as you can see on your screen: mono, poly, and saturated fat. And you can see the composition of eggs right there. Even look at the bottom of the egg composition chart, you'll see the cholesterol all the way out, but then it has some good amount of vitamin B12, vitamin B2, and protein and vitamin A. So it seems pretty high in some good vitamins and minerals as well. But you can noticeably see that the cholesterol at the bottom is pretty high. All right, let's moving on. We understand that eggs, they actually make good blood. The moderate consumption of 2 to 3 eggs per week does not raise blood cholesterol level, and that's something important to know. An excess of vitamin D intake from meat, milk, eggs, or sunlight over 3,000 units a day add to the plaque development and hardening of atherosclerosis. So one may be eating a large number of eggs per day, then also working in the sun. That may be an issue right there. All right, we also have eggs contain sulfur, which is needed for healthy bones. The sulfur containing foods, asparagus, eggs, garlic, and onions help repair bone, cartilage, connective tissue, and aids in the absorption of calcium. Now, there's also a test that you can use to identify allergies called the radio allergy absorbent test, RAST test. It identifies specific antibodies in the blood to certain foods or other substances. So you want to find out what you're allergic to, then you can actually use the RAST test. Also, 2/3 of all food poisoning cases are related to the use of poorly cooked eggs. And then eggs can cause cancer. Many chickens die of carcinoma. It is known that the cancer germ passed from the chicken into the egg. Now, it's also very important to notice this as a principle. You notice that the cancer passed from the chicken into the egg. It's in the same way that the nutrients, for example, chickens that are fed seaweed, they actually have a high concentration of DHA and also omega-3 type fatty acids in the eggs. And so they end up calling it DHA eggs. And so it tells you that whatever the chicken consumes actually ends up in the egg. There is also studies that have found that there are traces of certain heavy metals in eggs as well that comes from their feed, including the antibiotics. All right, so then let's get into our story. CDC on September 6th put out this notification. 65 people from 9 states have gotten sick from the same strain of Salmonella. And so the 9 states include the 3 states where the eggs were sold: Illinois, Michigan, and Wisconsin, in addition to California, Colorado, Iowa, Minnesota, Utah, and Virginia. Most sick people are from Wisconsin, or 42, or Illinois, 11. So they identified that the same strain was what got these 65 persons sick. Then it says 24 have been hospitalized and no deaths have been reported. And so as a result, the egg had to be recalled that it was distributed from this specific company to these different supermarkets and distribution outlets. The third bulletin point shows that the salmonella making persons sick is actually resistant to antibiotics, and so therefore giving persons antibiotics to combat this salmonella would not be successful. So persons would have to find other antibiotics aside from the nalidixic acid and the ciprofloxacin. And so that tells us also that this is also an issue. A lot of bacteria is becoming resistant to the strains. All right, moving on. It says here Salmonella. So what is Salmonella? We see that pretty much this is the most common cause of food poisoning. It has especially increased since antibiotics began being placed in animal feeds to prevent disease in crowded, unsanitary conditions and help them grow faster. So as a result of commercialization, we can understand that these vaccines, these antibiotics were given to make the conditions much safer for them to grow, but as a result, we see that it has an unintended effect. It says more than 50% of cattle, poultry, and swine are now given antibiotics, but doing this promoted the growth of antibiotic-resistant bacteria in animal intestines. 1/3 of all chickens in America actually have salmonella. And another study also confirms that in Germany, it says from the feed, microbes pass through the intestine of the bird onto the egg. So a lot of it is pointing back to the feed as a root of the issue. And so how is salmonella transmitted? It's transmitted very easily once that egg has been infected. Touching and handling other things within the kitchen, such as touching vegetables, salads, the whole works, makes it very difficult if one is not practicing the right health habits, washing of the hands and sanitizing the facilities that are being used in the kitchen or in whatever facility is processing the chicken as well. It says here, cooks that handle raw meats, especially raw meat as well, and then handle other food, especially raw food such as salad, endanger many people. Vegetarians should wash their hands with soap immediately after handling raw eggs, shells. Cook eggs well, and also advised to beware of mayonnaise. It says here in 1985, 17,000 people in the Northeast became ill from contaminated milk. All right. So how did this happen now? If you take a look at the diagram there with the bird, you'll recognize that the cloaca is a common chamber into which intestinal, urinary, and genital canals discharge. Because of this, it is not surprised that eggs often come out smudged with feces. So this in the cloaca, as you can see, the common chamber where feces also pass, the egg come in contact with it. Now this is interesting. It says eggs may be contaminated with salmonella because bacteria penetrating the shell through its numerous spores. Those with damaged shells present an even greater risk of contamination. So it's much easier for that salmonella to just pass on over and into the egg. So it says, washing does not eliminate the possibility of contamination since the microbes have usually already entered the egg. And so that goes to a level of diligence that is required to remove the egg as soon as it is laid, so that you don't have this penetration of microbes over a long period of time, because naturally the egg itself has antibacterial properties, so which is good. God designed it in such a way that it can also stave off for itself the lysosome, I believe it is called, that combats that. So here are some diseases that affect chickens. We have fowl pox, coccidiosis, fowl cholera, the common one that we all know, avian bird flu, infectious bronchitis, infectious corzea, Marek's disease, Newcastle disease, botulism, and bumble feet. Now, what this organization is saying is that once you give the chicken a healthy environment, they're more than likely they won't get sick, and that these diseases don't occur as often in a chicken's life cycle. And so it's just encourages us to disinfect surfaces and replace their food and water regularly. These chicken diseases might sound intimidating, but it is unlikely that your flock will get sick if you take care of them. And remember, one of the reasons why sickness increases with flocks is because of commercialization, because of the unsanitary conditions that a lot of them live in. So as a result of that, we tend to find the proliferation of sicknesses that affect these birds. All right, so I guess, should we stop eating eggs as a result of this information? Well, let's continue, because we want to be able to identify, to look more deeper as to what does egg have to offer. Do we just throw it through the window? All right, let's continue. In Ministry of Healing, page 320, paragraph 2, it says, the diet reform should be progressive. As disease in animals increases, the use of milk and eggs will become more and more unsafe, right? An effort should be made to supply their place with other things that are healthful and inexpensive. The people everywhere should be taught how to cook without milk and eggs so far as possible, and yet have their food wholesome and palatable. Here are some diseases that are connected with the consumption of eggs. We have autoimmune diseases such as MS, multiple sclerosis. We have degenerative disease such as Alzheimer's, certain malignancies or cancers such as lung or stomach cancer. We have gout, arthritic symptoms, thrombosis, kidney stones, allergies, asthma, atherosclerosis, migraines, carpal tunnel syndrome, and cradle cap. So if it is that you find that you have these diseases, then you have to now carefully consider whether or not you would want to consume eggs. You may have to reduce or eliminate eggs from the diet, so that you can so that you'll be able to prevent your ailment from actually extending, right? because sometimes it may just be that one thing that aggravates or keeps it existing. All right. However, there are certain cases now wherein we can take a look at eggs. It says here, you're in danger of taking too radical a view of health reform and prescribing for yourself a diet that will not sustain you. Constant Diets on Food, page 204, paragraph 3. It says, no extremes in health reform are to be advocated. The time will come when we may have to discard some of the articles of the diet we now use, such as milk and cream and eggs. And note she said some of the articles of food, because some persons, based on their economic situation, their physical location, may not be able to discard all articles of food. And we have to be very careful how we recommend or tell persons that this is what they need to do when they have not sufficient to supply the lack. Because yes, the one person may exist in a country that may have the necessary resources, they may have it, but the cost of it puts it out of their reach. And so them having to give up some of the things that supply. Remember when we started, we saw that eggs actually help to make good blood. Eggs are one of the most nutritive substances on this earth, very complete. Its protein is very beneficial to the human body. As a matter of fact, the egg has everything in it to actually create a new life, of course, because a fertilized egg produces another bird. So within the egg has all the relevant nutrients for the creation of life. And so of course, if that is the case, it has a lot of nutrients beneficial for the sustenance of life, right? And so we should be careful. He says, but my message is that you must not bring yourself a time of trouble beforehand and thus afflict yourself with death. The gospel must be preached to the poor, and the time has not yet come to prescribe the strictest diet. And so when I saw that they whenever we present, we also have to consider the poor, their economic situation, what they're able to do. And so we'll see what are the conditions. Right here in Ministry of Healing 320 paragraph 1, it says it, those who live in new countries or in poverty-stricken districts. So therefore, going to new countries or poverty-stricken where fruits and nuts are scarce should not be urged to exclude milk and eggs from their diet. Where fruits and nuts are scarce should not be urged to exclude milk and eggs from their diet. And that's a very important pointer. Why? Let's say, for example, nuts. Almond has one of the highest sources of fat compared to many other foods, whether plant-based or animal. Almonds, high. And so if you're not able to get that nut, and also nuts also have the essential amino acids that help to sustain our bodies. So therefore now, if we don't have these nuts, we're able to find it now in the egg, because the egg now has the essential, it has the protein, and the egg also has 10% fat and 12% protein. So here we're looking at something that can actually supply the place. So the counsel is saying, don't be so extreme now to think that, here what, I don't have any nuts, I don't have any but I'm not going to eat any milk or any egg. It's actually saying that we shouldn't bring upon ourselves, as the previous slide pointed out, a time of trouble or death beforehand. It says here, but in the case of persons whose blood making organs are feeble, especially if other foods to supply the needed elements cannot be obtained, milk and eggs should not be wholly discarded. So the principle is that if we cannot get what it takes to replace the eggs, we cannot discard it. It says here, great care should be taken, however, to obtain milk from healthy cows and eggs from healthy fowls that are well fed and well cared for. And the egg should be so cooked as to as to be most easily digested, right? So what is she pointing to here? What she's pointing to here is very consistent, because as we saw, a lot of the commercialized areas is where a lot of the diseased animals come from. But when you have the small farm raised, the homegrown raised chickens, you are more likely to have healthy fowls and well fed and cared for, wherein their waters are changed and the poop don't fall in the water and drink their own poop water. That whole scenario is well maintained. And so in that case, she's saying that yes, you can take eggs from those scenarios and use whenever you cannot find that which is necessary to supply your nutrients, or you're not able to afford that which supplies your nutrients on a regular basis. Because sometimes we end up making these decisions and then it turns out that it is detrimental to our health. Continuing. While warning have been given regarding the dangers of disease through butter and the evil of the free use of eggs by small children, yet we should not consider it a violation of principle to use eggs from hens that are well cared for and suitably fed. It is what? Not a violation of principle to use eggs from hens that are well cared for and suitably fed. Counsel Diet and Food, page 402, paragraph 2 says, the time has not yet come when I say that the use of milks and eggs should be wholly discontinued. Milks and eggs should not be classed with flesh meats. And I find that very interesting. It says milk and eggs should not be classed with flesh meats, because we know that there's the common statement that those who have not yet discarded flesh foods cannot be trusted. Those who are not discarded flesh-based diet cannot be trusted, and are actually not being prepared for translation. And so it's an indication of their spiritual state. And it's very interesting now that she's saying milk and eggs cannot be classed with those, because we can't look at persons who may consume milk and eggs in the same light as persons who consume meat and make statements about them. We have to be careful when it comes to that area. Why? Because especially eggs, they do not produce uric acids as in the case of meat. All right. It says in some ailments the use of eggs is very beneficial. So now we're seeing that she's pointing to egg as an actual remedy, that egg can be very beneficial in certain cases. It says here, this is your danger in Counsel Diet and Food, page 402, paragraph 3. This is your danger when you see that you're becoming weak physically, because there are many persons who take up a health journey, a plant-based journey, but they're not supplying their system with sufficient nutrients consistently. So the counsel is now saying, when you see that you're becoming weak physically, it is essential for you to make changes, and at once. Because you don't want to promote health deform, you want to promote health reform. It says, put into your diet something you have left out. It is your duty to do this. Get eggs of healthy fowls. Use these eggs cooked or raw. Drop them uncooked into the best unfermented wine you can find. This will supply that which is necessary to your system. Do not for a moment suppose that it will not be right to do this. Now that's a very important point, because many persons, once again, Christ says, my people perish for a lack of knowledge. And that is the case right here. In my personal testimony, in the case of stress or traumatic experiences, this egg with some unfermented wine is very good for the nerves, and it's also very good to bolster and strengthen the body. Very easily afforded, and very beneficial. Now, some persons would say, we could use herbal remedies for that. We could simply get some herbs that could assist with the nerves. But as far as we know, as things that are commonly and readily available, then the eggs and the wine is also something that we can readily use to address that issue. But we're talking about your system being drained or dragged down so physically, there is something that has to be used to bolster it, to quicken it, to stimulate it, to keep it up. And this is what the Spirit of Prophecy is recommending to be used. And this should be regarded as equal counsel as much as wanting to use herbs as well. Because if you do, when you look at many persons who are involved in health reform, it's at times it is seen as a prize to look really slim. All right, but we find that that may not necessarily be the case. In some ailments, the use of eggs is very beneficial. That's Counsel on Diet of Food again, page 402, paragraph 3. And remember, she already laid out the conditions. She already laid out the conditions wherein what eggs we should use from now. And these are healthy fowls, well cared for. So therefore, it somewhat changes it from a commercial setting. It says, what are some of the cases where we know this disease it is very beneficial in addressing ailments? We can see right here emaciation. Whenever there is emaciation, what is emaciation? Extreme thinness and gauntness, lack of proper nourishment, which is caused by undereating and eating almost totally of junk foods. So it's undereating and eating totally junk food and lack of proper nourishment. So many persons become emaciated. And so according to Encyclopedia of Natural Remedies, page 478, it says here, a fattening diet that will build tissue and blood. This should include dairy products. And so we saw that the egg has is one of the most complete nutritive reserve that exists on earth, that can be used to sustain the body of man. Right? We already looked at the negatives, and many persons would have looked at the negatives and just use it as a means to just write off the egg completely. But we see that whenever the body goes to the extreme now of lacking, the eggs can be used as a means of bolstering up back the health and the system. All right? It says here in second selected messages, the writer herself, the writer of the Lord, I have not knowingly drunk a cup of genuine coffee for 20 years, only, as I stated, during my sickness for medicine. I drank a cup of coffee, very strong, with raw egg broken into it. So we see now that because this writer for Counsels on Diet and Food is the same one that says we should not drink coffee, because coffee is a stimulant because of the caffeine and the different effects, and we go through all the negatives it has on the system, and coffee does that. But what we're seeing here is that now in the case of sickness, she used both egg and coffee. Now what kind of sickness could that be? Because coffee is a stimulant and egg is also a stimulant. So quite obvious, whenever the body is exhausted, whenever the body is drained, whenever the body is emaciated and needs to be stimulated or uplifted, there are some things that are not regularly prescribed for use that can be used medicinally to bolster and strengthen our health. And we should not think it a violation of principle to use these things that are readily available to us, because sometimes they're readily available, like, but maybe I can't use it, the counsel doesn't support it. But here we're seeing that the eggs have the nutritive properties to stimulate and to uplift the system. And now when I say stimulate, you're going to find out in the next slide how beneficial eggs can also be. It says here, in the case of frigidity, which is the absence of sexual desire or the inability to find pleasure in sexual intercourse, it is recommended to eat eggs fresh from the store, as in from where the fowls have laid it. So we understand then, that's taken from the Natural Remedies Encyclopedia, page 830. So we understand then that the eggs help us with the passions, stimulate the passions and the desire. So that's very good, right? Very good. So it shows then, which now makes the next statement, Ministry of Healing, page 320, paragraph 1, true, in that it is true that persons in full flesh and in whom the animal passions are strong need to avoid the use of stimulating foods. So she's now pointing to eggs as a stimulating food. Especially in families of children who are given to sensual habits, eggs should not be used. So families of children who are given to masturbation, secret vice, um, uh, who are already a full flesh, you don't want to stimulate them even further. So it's best not to now give them. Eggs need to be removed from their diet, because in the case of frigidity, when there's the absence of sexual desire, you can actually use eggs to stimulate. All right. Eggs to combat poisons. So in constant that page 402 paragraph, we need to see another beneficial use of eggs. It says here, eggs contain properties which are remedial agencies in counteracting poisons. That's wonderful. It says here, eat eggs to obtain sulfur to counteract the arsenic. Beautiful. So eat it along with the onions, beans, legumes, and garlic. It eliminates the arsenic. Wonderful. Now, what are some substitutes or natural replacements for eggs? Well, we have, for the scrambled egg option, we have DRD's vegan omelet. I've tried that personally. You can check that out on their website, drdnaturalhealth.com. You also have the liquid. DRD's one is made from chickpea. We also have the liquid form, just eggs. I've tried that as well. Simply eggless. I've not tried that, but I know that there may be pros and cons with the liquid ones, because they may add canola oil to it, and the canola oil, that's another story, right? But man has figured that they can get the same texture and the same look and the same taste as well, almost equal taste, when making some of these using these plant-based ingredients to make these products. And so yes, so that's for your scrambled option. For your baking option, now they have the energy egg replacer, and they have Bob's Red Mill egg replacer for baking options. And then now you can actually, if you don't want to use any of those, you can of course use egg whites, applesauce, chia seed or flaxseed, pureed fruit. um, Also know that the issue with the egg replacers or the egg substitute is that they may add baking powder to them, and as we know, baking powder is not the best for your digestive system, because it can neutralize the stomach acids as well. So yeah, there we have it, our health presentation for this afternoon, just to really show us that there has to be a balanced approach, and especially persons who are not um, as cashed or economically stable to just quickly go out and order this herb, but they have an egg right next to them. They should not feel afraid to use it to alleviate their distress, because God has put remedial properties in the eggs. However, care should be given as a list as is placed there as the things that the egg can contribute towards. And so, you can take this as a introductory uh, briefing, and you can do further looking into as to the benefits of eggs, and how you can use them to help you from day to day in. And we hope to see you next time for our next presentation. This was Your Health Daily with Healthy Reforms.